Welcome to the Glen Merzer Show, where we talk all things vegan. If you're not already vegan, no worries, we'll get you there. If you are, tune in for health advice, information on climate change, and all the damage done by our most destructive industry, animal agriculture. We'll also talk cooking, theater, film, and culture. My 2 reasons for starting this podcast: to entertain, to inform, and to make people vegan. Oh, that's 3. Shit. Hello and welcome to the Glen Merzer Show. You can find us on YouTube. Please remember to subscribe and across all your favorite podcast platforms. My special guest today is also a podcast host. She's actually the co-host of the Growing a Healthy Child podcast, co-host with Carrie Bruno. You can find that on YouTube. She is the president and CEO of the plant-based nutrition movement. She has been a registered nurse for some 30 years, and she is an expert on child nutrition and a member of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. Welcome, Meryl Fury.
Well, thank you, Glenn. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, so glad to have you here. Tell us about your journey. Where did you start when you were growing up? Did you ever think you'd be in the nutrition business?
You know, that's so funny. So we have to do a little retrospective, right? So started when I was 15. I started, I cut out mammals out of my diet.
Okay.
And that was a result of the price of beef going up very high. And my mother, who was the parent responsible for the grocery budget and putting the food on the table, moms do the grocery shopping and the cooking for the most part. She was complaining that she couldn't afford to put 3 square meals on the table, right? Because the beef was high, and along with beef went like pork and chicken, and all the other animal proteins went up kind of all at once at that time. So she was pretty unhappy, and she did a whole lot of complaining about it. I was super close to my mom, and it just was killing me that she was so upset about this. I mean, she talked about it a lot, at least the way I remember it. It was several times a day. At least every time was time to put a meal on the table. And finally, after, I don't know, a couple months of that, I think, I got together, maybe sooner, I got together with a friend of mine who had 4 kids in her family. We only had 2 in my family. And her mom was complaining the same stuff. How am I going to feed you kids, and, cost of beef, and just on and on. And this friend of mine, who I'm still friends with today, her name was Lori, decided we would stop eating beef. We would just give up the 4-legged mammals because, it obviously was distressing for our moms. And then if we gave them up, that would be something like 21 meals a week that they could give our portion of animal products to whoever else. They could eat it themselves, give it to dad, give it to sister, brother, whoever you want to give it to. We just would bow out. So we thought this was a brilliant solution and would decrease our mother's anxiety about it all. My mom came to pick me up from Lori's house that weekend, and I got in the car and I said, guess what? I'm going to stop eating meat because I don't want you to have to worry about it. And literally, Glenn, she nearly drove off the road. I mean, seriously, she was like, oh, what? Oh my gosh, no, you can't stop eating meat. How are you going to grow up to be big and strong? Oh my gosh, no, you're going to be a weakling. You don't worry about the food budget. I worry about the food budget. That's my job, not your job. You just eat what I put on the table. And I said, okay, but I promised Lori I wasn't going to eat mammals. We're not eating meat anymore. And I think she just ignored me and blew it off or whatever. Anyway, we got home that night and she made spaghetti and meatballs, which was one of her well-known, well-created recipes. You may hear my dog barking in the background. I don't know if you do or not, but...
well, your dog might want the meatballs.
He might. Actually, he's pretty good with vegetables, actually.
Oh, good.
Anyway, so that night she put spaghetti and meatballs on my plate. That was the way we handled it for dinner was I would go to the stove, she would put the food on the plate, and I would sit down and eat, right? Very obedient child. Well, this night, I bring her my plate. She puts the spaghetti and meatballs on the plate with the sauce and all that. And I said, Mom, I'm not eating meat. And she said, sit down and eat, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know how moms used to do back in the day?
Yeah.
You just,
yeah.
Right? So I sat down, I rolled the meatballs off to the side. I ate the sauce with the spaghetti. The next night, she tried some other meal. I told her I wasn't eating meat. It went on that way until the Friday came around again, and she made spaghetti and meat sauce Friday. Now that was very unusual. She would never have made two very similar meals in the same week. And she never made meat sauce. So she made meat sauce. I go give her my plate. She puts the pasta, puts the sauce with the meat. It crumbled all in the sauce. And I said, Mom, I'm not eating meat. And she's, sit down and eat. I go to sit down at the table, and I'm not proud of this as I look back on it, but I twirled the spaghetti up on my fork with the meat sauce, put it in my mouth, and literally spit out every bit of meat that was on the fork. So there I am sitting at the dinner table, spitting into my plate. Not pretty, really not nice. But I think at that point, my mother realized, okay, I'm not going to fight. I'm done, right? So I won that round, and it just
now
continued.
What's interesting about this is you had a strong objection to eating the meat that originated with the budget.
Yes.
Which was on your mother's behalf. And your mother said, don't worry about the budget, but it feels to me listening to this as if your objection was to killing animals or to something else about the meat.
It wasn't. It was purely that my mom was so upset. I just couldn't live with that. She was very important to me. Her stability and her mindset.
Now, I hate to take your mother's side.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
But she was telling you, don't worry about the budget. And you were insisting on worrying about the budget.
Yeah, I was.
So it was one of those, don't do this for me. No, I'm going to do this for you fights.
It was kind of one of those, kind of. But by that point, I was 15-ish.
Yeah.
So I was hard-headed.
All right.
I've been a rebel my whole life. And so by the time it came to that, it was like, no, Mom, I already made this promise. Lori and I are not eating this. So
okay. So we have to add this now to the list of reasons to go vegan, because some people go vegan for the animals. Yeah. Some people go vegan for health. Yeah. Some people go vegan for the environment and the climate. And we have to add Meryl went vegan for her mother's budget.
That's right.
So
we could boil it down to financial concerns.
Okay. Going vegan for the budget. Okay. So what happens next?
Well, from there, I just continued to learn about human health and food as medicine. Back then, I studied herbology and the effects of different kind of food on the body, mostly my own body. There were not a lot of textbooks. There were none of these authors who are out now. I never heard of T. Colin Campbell or Caldwell Esselstyn. Those guys were not in. I don't even know if they were. I don't know what they were doing then, but they weren't writing books that I got a hold of. There were no recipe books that didn't include, cream and cheese and meat and fish and all of that. That didn't exist. So I was very much on my own. I had just a small handful of books that I could reference. One was Dick Gregory's book, which has a longer title, Cooking with Mother Nature, I think it's called, or I can't remember. It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And then,
by the way, he was the reason I went vegetarian. He was one of the reasons. He was always an inspiration
very powerful,
to me.
Right? Yeah. And he went into fasting and things like that, and very much a civil rights activist. So I followed.
And let me just throw this in. I heard Dick Gregory speak when he was fasting against the war in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And this was unbelievable, because I didn't know you can fast for like a year and a half with nothing but fruit juices and water. and he was still running 6 miles a day. And I
Yes.
saw him, he was like 98 pounds or something. This is a man who used to be 260 pounds.
Yeah.
And he was asked, I heard him ask, Mr. Gregory, would you fast again if America got involved in another Vietnam? And he said, I wouldn't fast again if they were fighting in my living room. So the self-deprecation and humility of that great man, he was just fantastic.
Yeah, right. Strong civil rights advocate, and
Yeah.
just a great human being. But that was one of the first books. And then I had Diet for a Small Planet by Frances Meryl A.
Right.
I had the Moosewood Cookbook,
Right.
which was more dairy, heavy on the dairy stuff. But so those are the books I had. And that's what I went from. And the rest of it was just experimentation on myself. When I started studying herbology, there were a couple books that I had that I would reference for herbal medicines. But the rest of it was just, sort of figured out on my own. And
okay, now you start doing this because of the family budget.
Yes.
At what point do you begin to see, oh, this is actually healthy? And, oh, this is good for other reasons?
Probably by the time I was 17, really.
So it took about 2 years to...
Yeah, because, being 15, I was pretty much doing it just because I said I would, and I was being rebellious. I wasn't sick at all, or I didn't have any issues, right? And back at that time, animal compassion and animal rights wasn't really a well-publicized thing, it just didn't come up, not in my neighborhood anyway. So I really didn't have any diseases or discomforts to overcome. But I do know that by the time I was 18, for sure, I went for a brief time, like maybe about a week. I tried eating meat again, and it made me really ill. So at that point, I was like, okay, that does not work for me at all. Period. And then that was going back to eating mammals, and then it was eliminating dairy products. I realized I had a dairy allergy, so that helped. Got rid of that. Then it was eliminating fish because I moved to near the Great Lakes region, which is where I live now. And I could not possibly eat the fish out of the Great Lakes. That's some scary stuff. And then...
Because of the pollution in the Great Lakes?
Yeah, so part of my upbringing, I spent a large amount of time in the U.S. Virgin Islands in the Caribbean. And the water that's very different water. The Caribbean is... at least back at that time, very much cleaner, right?
Yeah.
And fresh fish pulled right out of the ocean is a different thing, right? Tropical fish is a very different thing than lake fish. And when I moved here to the upper Midwest, I just couldn't. It's like, I give up. I can't. And then, interesting thing. So I'm a registered nurse, right? One time, only once, and I'd love to find this pamphlet again. I saw a pamphlet from the Department of Natural Resources. I used to manage a prenatal clinic. And I saw this pamphlet one time that said pregnant women should not eat more than one fish per year out of an inland lake. And that was a long time ago, maybe 20 years ago. Okay. And I thought, well, I love pregnant women, and pregnant women are pretty special, but they're not that special, right? So if a pregnant woman shouldn't eat fish from a lake more than one time a year, then no one else should either. Right. Period. Right. Right. And now we know that the lakes are heavily polluted with PCBs and mercury and all those other fun forever chemicals. So that was that. And then, the last to go was poultry out of my diet.
Oh, poultry was the last to go. How old were you when you became vegan and got rid of the poultry?
I'm going to say that was about 7 or 8 years ago.
Oh, only 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
So it took you a long time to get rid of the poultry.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yes, it did. Yeah. It was a lot of testing, and all the time, because I started out with no books to read about it. It was just testing on myself all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of assumed that there wasn't a lot to read. I never went looking much for textbooks or science-backed information. I just never looked. I just always focused on, okay, this is how I feel when I eat this. This is how I feel when I eat that.
So at that point, you had been a nurse for some time.
Yeah,
And did your experience as a nurse in any way inform your nutritional perspectives?
a lot, a
Tell
lot.
us about that.
So, like I said, because this is all self-experimentation with this diet and how I feel, right? And my nursing specialty is or has been public health. So I worked in low income environments, mostly with people who had very, very limited resources. And our medical care model is you manage disease. We're not actively trying to reverse illness in the American medical system. So we would have patients come in and you get to know them. You ask them all kinds of questions. You do the background history and all of that stuff. Get to know their families in a lot of cases. I did a lot of home visits in and out of some of the rougher areas of town. And so you get to know people. And they would come to the clinic and get told, let's say they received a diagnosis of diabetes, very common, right? And then they're given medications and they're sent to a dietitian, and the dietitian would tell them, okay, cut back on your sugar. You can drink diet soda, cut it back to 2 slices of bread a day or 2 tortillas per meal or whatever they were told, right? Lean meats, low fat, skim milk, they get the usual line. And then come back in 3 months. And in 3 months, they'd either be the same or they'd be worse, and they'd get more medications, and then come back in another 3 months and they'd get the same. And over years, we would watch people just deteriorate, their health just deteriorate.
Right.
They might be gaining weight still. They might, they're losing their eyesight, their kidneys are going, they're, numbness and tingling in their feet and all these things. Just terrible to watch. Terrible, terrible. And thankfully, given the way that I eat, I've always eaten, well, certainly since I was 15, way more vegetables than anything else, because that's the way my diet was structured. And I never had any illnesses. I didn't get the flu forever, I didn't get the flu until I hit COVID a couple of years ago, but I just don't get sick like that. And I remember thinking, if people could stop eating all this chemical-laden garbage food, the heavy meats, the cheeses. I knew I was allergic to cheese. If you just and the way it occurred to me, because like I said, I didn't study. There weren't any books that I had to study, right? So I just sort of looked at it like, if I can keep the level of mucus down in my head, then I don't get sick. There's nothing for the bacteria or the viruses to cling to. It's the way it worked for me. So keep the mucus down, keep the stuff you're allergic to down, keep the chemicals and garbage out of your body, and your body will handle itself. But that was not the case for so many of our patients. 99.95% of them were eating the standard American diet and getting sicker and sicker every 3 months. When they came in, they were sicker. So it was very difficult to watch. The other aspect of it is that medical professionals are raised in the same environment as their patients, right? We're all living in the same country. We all get the same marketing, and on some level, the same kind of consumer education. So to work, and actually, like I said, I manage clinics, to be in a clinic and watch all of my peers struggle with weight and high blood pressure and stress problems, anxiety, some diabetes, just all of it. And none of them connected it to diet. It was always, in the medical setting, there's always some drug rep or somebody willing to bring in cakes and donuts and pastries and so much stuff all the time. There was even one time where we got a new nurse practitioner who started working in the clinic, and her passion was baking. She baked like, I don't know, like other people breathe. I've never seen anybody bake like that. She baked and baked and baked. And every time she came to the clinic, which was like 3 times a week, she would bring her newest thing. It was a pineapple upside down thingy, or it was a custard banana thingy, or what. Oh my gosh, so much stuff. So much stuff. And I remember I had worked very hard to change the environment in our clinic, the food environment, so that when we had potlucks, it was all healthy stuff. You know, when we had the drug rep lunches, I would tell them, okay, have the drug rep at least bring a large salad, and okay, the rest of the garbage that comes with the lunch, but at least make sure there's a salad. So I had tried very hard to do that. And this one nurse practitioner came in, and she just like insisted on bringing these heavy desserts. She and I literally went toe to toe about, why are you doing this? Why? Everyone in here is struggling with weight or high blood pressure or heart disease or something. Why are you doing this? And she just would not stop. So undermining. So finally, she and I really had a quite the argument about, you have to stop. This is so unkind. It's so unfair. You're preying on people's weaknesses like this. Bring in fruit. Bring in something else. No, she wouldn't do it. So it's just very different. It's a challenge in the nursing and medical profession. People are very attached to salt, sugar, fat, animal products, and making them in gloriously beautiful, creative ways. It's just very difficult.
And the hospitals serve food that isn't any better than that nurses' desserts, right?
Correct. You want to hear a funny story?
Sure.
So, given that I've been this way, I consider myself whole food, plant-based all my life, right? Because the meat has always been way less than 10% of what I ate until I just completely cut out all the animal products some years back, right? I am married to a diehard Wisconsin meat and cheese head.
Uh-huh. And we're going to talk about why you got angry with him in a little bit.
Well,
we're going to have to talk about that.
Well, he wound up going in the hospital. I'll leave that as our lead-in for that story. But he wound up in the hospital, and to look at the meals available to him while he's in a hospital bed, literally cheese lasagna, ham and cheese omelets, prime rib, this and that. I just crazy. Yeah.
You know, I had hernia surgery. The whole food, vegan, low-fat diet is the best diet there is, but it does not prevent you from sneezing your way into a hernia. Last year I sneezed and I went, ow, and it was a hernia. Mm-hmm. So I drove to Florida for hernia surgery, and I woke up in the recovery room and there was no pain. And I said, how come I'm not in any pain? And they said, well, it's the anesthesia, of course. You'll wait till tomorrow.
It'll wear off.
And then they said, would you like a ham and cheese sandwich? And I said, do you have any idea who you're talking to? And I guess they thought I was a rabbi. So they gave me applesauce. But there was, the next day, there was still no pain. And there was never any pain. I had open surgery and I never had to take an aspirin. And I attribute that to the whole food, low-fat, plant-based diet, because there isn't inflammation in my body. But they were going to give me a ham and cheese sandwich. So, all right, let's let's tell the story of why you got angry at your husband.
So here's the story. I'm going to go back to, I'm a nurse, and this is not pretty. Okay. Nurses are not supposed to get mad at their patients, right? However, we are human and we have our thoughts about things, right? So anyway, here I am. I have this husband who is a meat and cheese head. Love him to pieces. In fact, today is our 21st, I think, 22nd anniversary.
Oh, happy anniversary.
Oh, thank you
And
very
I
much.
think, the traditional 22nd anniversary gift
Yes.
is to go on a podcast and complain about your husband. So
Well, you know what? I'm not going to complain because I'm really super proud of him. He's
I
done some
know, and you love
good
him, but
stuff.
why did he
What
make you a little
happened?
angry?
Right? What happened? So 25-ish years we've been together. And
Okay.
all this time I have been the same way. Eat your vegetables, eat your fruit, right? Encouraging him to be as follow as health promoting a lifestyle as you can. Because there's
Right.
no guarantees anyway, no matter what you do. The best you
Mm-hmm.
can do is stack the deck in your favor. That's all you get, right? The rest of it's a crapshoot. Okay. So he, being born and raised here in Wisconsin, he likes brats, he likes burgers, cheese, pepperoni, and other stuff.
Okay.
Right? Not a lot of vegetables. If I put more than 4 green beans on his plate, that's an anger, that's an upset. Don't put any lettuce on anything. Nothing of the cabbage family is allowed. There's just, there's all kinds of constraints around vegetables. And fruit, no, not so much. Maybe we can
And
have,
he has always been this way?
this is since before I knew him. Since before I knew him. Yeah. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
when I first met him, he only ate that list of things like brats and pizza and burgers and hot dogs,
Mm-hmm.
maybe. Yeah. He drank Dr. Pepper and coffee only.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, desserts are a free for all. You can have all the desserts you want with that diet. Anyway, so over the years, I tried very hard to encourage him to eat more vegetables and more fruit and drink water and back down the sodas. And he did some changes. He really did. He improved his diet by a bit. Back in 2020, when COVID hit, I encouraged him to go to the hospital for a voluntary procedure or imaging called a coronary artery calcium scan.
Mm-hmm.
That indicated that he had a moderate to severe risk of heart disease, which meant that he needed to go see a cardiologist. Thankfully, we have a plant-based cardiologist here in our town, and he had some previous experience with that cardiologist as a friend. So that's who he chose to go to, which was a blessing. The doctor told him, okay, you have moderate to severe risk of cardiac disease. That I can't tell you if that means you're going to walk out of here and collapse with a heart attack, but you have a risk for sure. So I want you to go whole food, plant-based, 100%. You don't need any medications. We're not going to do a cardiac cath. We're not going to do any of that other stuff. No fancy procedures. Just change your diet. That's all you got to do. And do what your wife says, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I kept telling him, all right, perfect. Whole food, plant-based means fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts and seeds, beans, and mushrooms. That's what we're going to do. Well, no, he didn't want to do that. He preferred the more junk food vegan, right? So lots of cashew milk ice cream, which is super yummy, but, really kind of high fat and not super healthy. Vegan ginger snap cookies,
Mm-hmm.
fried this and that, lots of just,
Mm-hmm.
okay. He was down
So
that.
he was willing to go vegan, but not healthy vegan.
Correct.
Mm.
Doing lots of junk food, chips, potato chips are vegan,
Mm.
Fritos,
Mm.
right? Mm-hmm.
Even
Yeah.
I'm getting a little angry now.
I know. So
Yeah.
there we go. We go for that for another 2 years, and he's
Mm-hmm.
eating like that. And I'm telling him this is not going to end well. But
Yeah.
at this point, I don't want to be a nag anymore. It's like I'm done. There's 20 something years of me telling him. It's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
please. Okay. So a couple months ago, we go to bed, right? I'm sleeping. And you know, when you live with somebody a long time, you can tell when their sleeping pattern is off. You know, they're like
Right.
moving around in the bed and they're making noises. Finally, he sits up on the edge of the bed and I say to him, his last name is Nelson. I say, Nelly, what's going on with you? He says, how do you know if you're having a heart attack?
Mm-hmm.
I said, like that. That's exactly how you know when you're having a heart attack. Anyway, we wind up quick ambulance ride to the local hospital. He gets a cardiac catheter done. He gets a stent placed. They avoid the heart attack he had, or the massive heart attack, because he was having one. He had one artery that was like 100% blocked and the other one was 90% blocked. Really not pretty. The good news is that he did okay. You know, he didn't have any sustained or long-term permanent damage to any of his heart muscle. But boy, was I mad. Just, I tried for 25 years to prevent this from happening, right? Yeah. And to no avail, apparently, or maybe to minimal success. At least he didn't like have one massive heart attack and die, right?
Right.
Had a heart attack and lived to tell the tale. But yeah, that's it's angering and humbling to be a healthcare professional and advise somebody that you love and care about how to handle it and have them not do what you say, have the exact opposite happen. And then all those sequelae roll out right after that. On top of that,
is he compliant now with the diet?
He is, as far as I know, super compliant. So the good news is, like I said, he didn't suffer any permanent damage. And within 8 weeks of the catheterization and the stent being placed, he was off 3 of the medications that they started him on after.
Great.
His cholesterol and all his lipids, the triglycerides and the HDL and the LDL and all of that dropped by 66% within 8 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He is
so now that he's doing what he resisted doing for 20 odd years, what does he say? Does he say, you know what, this isn't so hard? What does he say?
He's, you know, he's grateful. He tells all of his friends that they ought to do it. You know, they ought to watch what you eat. Yeah, those eggs, they're going to kill you. Whatever he says, you know. He's funny though. You know, he still has this little, you know, I would love to have a pepperoni pizza. And I'm like, okay, you know, you do what you want, but I don't think you want to have another heart attack. As I recall, that wasn't a lot of fun the first time. Right. So let's not, you know. So we find ways to make his favorite foods without all that extra added animal products and all that stuff. He's good with it. You know, he realizes it's saving his life. His other thing is that he's a hobby pilot. He likes to fly.
A hobby pilot?
Yeah, he likes to fly small aircraft, vintage aircraft. And once you have a heart attack or a stent placed, you lose your medical clearance for your pilot's license.
Yeah.
So that has been a great motivator for him to adhere to the diet and get his license cleared. So he can.
How do you get it cleared once you've had that event?
Yeah, so you have to go through, you know, you have to go to a doctor, have them check off a bunch of tests. You have to have your lipids done and you know, a stress test done, and you send all this hefty package of information to the FAA. And those doctors there at the FAA review your current status and what your doctor's notes say, and they decide whether or not you're clear to fly.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a thing. It's a terrible thing for a pilot to get their wings clipped like that.
Yeah. He has to get cardiac clearance to fly. I had to get cardiac clearance for my hernia operation. Everybody needs cardiac clearance.
Yeah. That's right.
Now, Meryl, one of the great things you do is you work with children so that they can be healthy from a young age and not grow up to have heart attacks. So tell us about the 6 Million Seeds program.
Wow. Yeah. Thanks for asking me about that, Glenn. This is something, it literally wakes me up in the morning and puts me to bed at night. So I'm the president and CEO of a nonprofit, 501c3, that's called Plant-Based Nutrition Movement. And in that nonprofit, we created a project called the 6 Million Seeds Child Nutrition Project. It is all about teaching children and their parents or caregivers, their adult people, the importance of feeding children healthy food. Because in this country, we basically feed children very poorly. There's, I think it was a study that came out in the Journal of American Medical Association, JAMA, that said 67% of the calories that our children receive between the ages of 2 and 19 come from ultra processed foods, which means it's a lot of chemicals and dyes and sugars and fats and preservatives and additives and just who knows what all that they're ingesting. And the calories are really truly empty, if not dangerously empty calories, right? And we have children who are already, by the time they're 5 to 15, easily dealing with morbid obesity. They're dealing with diabetes. We have high blood pressure. We have heart disease already starting, cancers, asthma, skin disorders, autoimmune conditions, all these in little children. And these are diseases that used to primarily be found in the adult population, but now they're found in children. One of the ways that we could mitigate that or prevent that, certainly reduce the incidence of, would be if we fed children more fruits, more vegetables, whole grains, beans, nuts, seeds, and mushrooms. If we could just do that, we would do amazing work to protect our children's health. In the last 5 years, the CDC has decreased our children's life expectancy 4 times. Which I have kids. That to me is something I can't tolerate. I can't tolerate it. I hate it. How do you mean? What do you mean that my children won't live to be as old as my parents? That's ridiculous in the country that is at least among the 10 wealthiest countries in the world, right? So the project is all about teaching children and the adults how to eat healthy food. What is healthy food? Giving them the experience of all these whole foods that, and showing them how to cook it, what it tastes like, how do you play with it, how to not take it so seriously, not to make it a struggle. We also have a podcast that you mentioned earlier called Growing a Healthy Child. And that is a podcast very similar to this, where we talk to other people who know about different aspects of how to feed children, why you feed children healthy food, what impact does it have on the planet, what impact does it have on the other species of the planet, all of that, organic gardeners, researchers, medical professionals, educators, artists, anybody who can speak to parents about how children eat. Because if we don't do something, Glenn, I don't know what's going to happen to our kids. I don't know where we're going to be in another 50 years. Right now, with the trends in childhood illness, obesity up, right? ADHD up, autism up, all of it is only increasing. I'll give you one of the other things that motivates me. This past January, the American Academy of Pediatrics put out their first ever guidance for pediatricians and family practice docs to counsel parents of children who have obesity. Now, up till now, they've been willing to just sit and watch the children gain weight and kind of, they call it watchful waiting. You just
watchful waiting.
Watchful
That's
waiting.
nice.
Yeah, it's what we do. We watchful wait as they continue to gain weight. And maybe we say something about drink skim milk or decrease screen time or get them to go outside a little bit more. And that's really the only coaching that they get, right?
Oh.
Well, now the new guidance is if you see a little 2-year-old or 4 or 5-year-old and they're, portly people, chunky little kids, right? counsel them. This is for the medical professional. Counsel them about decreasing weight, but don't talk about diets because, that's a bad word. And, you don't want to necessarily recommend any particular way of eating because you might hurt somebody's feelings. But, you do so, you say something, talk to them, maybe 26 times in a year is a suggestion, 26 times to say
26. Oh, every other week.
every other week.
Oh, there's some good science behind that.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
I think it was a study in the New England Journal of Medicine that said that if every 2 weeks you say something meaningless, that's very helpful.
But you can make money doing it. You can charge for every one of those office visits. So there's that. And then if by the time the child gets to be 12 years old, if they've reached that obesity thing, that 95th percentile of height for weight, you can offer them weight loss medications.
Medications to a 12-year-old.
And then if
so the possibility of actually feeding children human food has never come up.
Wait, because it gets better.
Oh, it gets better.
Yes, it does. Because if they're still at the 95th percentile by the time they're 13, you can recommend bariatric surgery.
Oh, oh my goodness.
I can only tell you.
Pure insanity, isn't it? What is wrong with these people?
What are we doing? What are we doing to our children? What are we doing? What are we doing?
And, with education, when people evaluate education in America, they say, well, how are the math scores going?
Yes.
And how are the English comprehension scores going? And they sort of give teachers report cards. Now, that may be a little bit unfair because it isn't only on the teachers to educate our youth, but there's a little bit of logic in saying, how are our schools doing? Let's base it on these tests. Let's see how the kids are doing. Why doesn't anyone ever give the medical profession a report card? We're the fattest, sickest population ever to walk planet Earth. I say they're not doing a very good job.
Right.
How could people revere their doctors and hospitals so much? They're obviously not doing a very good job.
Now I'll say as a medical professional, there's certainly times I am all for going to the hospital. If I have a perforated ulcer, take me in. Spinal meningitis, take me in. I'm having a stroke right now, take me in, right? I have an open fracture, bones poking out through my thigh. Heck yeah, take me, right?
Right.
But for chronic illness, not so much. We are missing some critical, fundamental information.
We have great surgeons in this country, and if you get beat up in a car accident, you want to go to the hospital and have those great surgeons fix you. There's
in America,
no question about
we're
that.
Good. We're
That's
good.
But if you're eating your way into disease and you don't realize that you're eating your way into disease and you go to so many doctors who haven't learned the first thing about nutrition, who then tell you, well, try to eat healthy, it's not going to work. Now, thankfully, there is a whole movement, which you are part of, called there's the Plantrition Project, and there's the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. And now we have some thousands of really good doctors and health professionals out there who are spreading the truth, but there's still a small minority.
True.
Tell us about the College of Lifestyle Medicine.
So the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, is a great, I'll call it an institution, for lack of a better way to put it, that is focused on encouraging medical professionals, either before they get licensure and after, right, to adopt 6 basic principles of human health, right? They call them the 6 pillars. I'll see if I can remember all 6. I usually forget one, and it's never the same one that I forget. Nutrition, because it's critical for human health. What we eat is, what do we say, 80% of how our health picture plays out. Sleep, also super important. Can't go more than 4 or 5 days without some sleep, right? Physical activity, very important. Stress management is another one. avoiding toxic substance is another one. And the last one is healthy interpersonal relationships. Those are 6 facets
Okay.
of
You got
health.
all 6.
I
That was
did.
good.
Amazing this time. Amazing.
Yes.
So we focus on promoting that message and all the intricacies of that message. So within nutrition, let's say, because that's kind of my wheelhouse where I sit, teaching people all the aspects of eating healthy food, right? Definitely they promote the plant forward diet. For the purposes of ACLM, American College of Lifestyle Medicine, they don't say 100% whole food, plant-based, all or nothing. That's the standard. They do recommend, though, at least 80% plant-based.
And
And
most of the doctors themselves would be 100%, wouldn't they?
a lot of them are.
So
Yeah.
when the advice is coming from a doctor who herself or himself knows how to eat the proper human diet, a diet exclusively of plants, low in fat, um, they're gonna they're gonna work with the patient and maybe feel that they have to uh, be a little bit of a gradualist to
Yes.
get the patient on board, but they're going to be working towards 100% plant exclusive diet most of the time.
Right. Or certainly not discouraging of.
Right.
Certainly accepting of, supportive of. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
Now,
what it's about.
yeah. Now, tell us about the history of the plant based nutrition movement that you are the president of.
Okay. We'll call it PBNM for short.
And that's
Um,
.org, right?
.org. PBNM.org.
PBNM.org.
Yes. So it was started by an interventional cardiologist. His name is Dr. Stephen Loam. He is currently located, I believe, in California. At the
Yeah.
time he started this organization, he was here in the Chicago area.
Right. And let me interrupt to say Dr. Loam does some very good videos. He's a very good
Yes.
speaker. You could
Yes,
find
he
him on
is.
YouTube.
Yeah, true, true, true. And most recently, I think it was within the last year, he had the experience of, let me tell you a little bit about the guy. He came from a family of very heavyweight people. He went into cardiology like most medical professionals do because we want to make a difference. We want to help people feel better. And at the same time, he was a bit heavy himself. So he went into cardiology and started practicing medicine. He got his board certification, his double board certification, and he wanted to help people feel better. He started using the standard and recommended methods by the American Heart Association and Cardiology Association and all the things and tools he had available to himself as a cardiologist. And he realized that doing everything that he could along the textbook lines of how to do it was not making a difference. His patients were still coming in. They were still sick. They were still getting more and more medications every time, still having more cardiac events, more heart attacks, more strokes. All of that stuff was still happening. And he got frustrated, right? He decided to start the same care plan for himself. And he added running marathons.
Huh.
And even with that, his own numbers and what we call biometrics were not changing. He was not improving, not getting any better. So he realized that the usual plan for healing people with heart disease was not really a plan to heal anyone. It was just a plan to keep people busy, I guess, busy and distracted. So he started hunting around looking for an answer to this conundrum. And he happened upon whole food plant-based eating, and he took that on wholeheartedly and lost a bunch of weight and still, I think, continued to run marathons and just like turned his whole health picture around, right? With that, he went back to his colleagues in cardiology and started talking up what happened, what he found out, his personal experiments on his own life. And, let's start teaching our patients about this. And as he told me the story, they did. And his patients within their medical practice started having fewer cardiac events, fewer strokes, fewer medications, fewer everything, right? All their numbers dropping beautifully, lower heart, lower blood pressure scores, all the stuff, These are the things that make medical professionals very happy, right?
Yes.
Well, they're doing really well. They're doing all this stuff. Their patients are getting better. And one day, somebody in their practice got a call from the chief medical officer of their medical system and was invited to come to the chief guy's office for a conversation. So, as I understand it, it was not Dr. Loam who had this experience himself, but he said that his colleague went to the chief medical officer's office thinking he's going to get kudos and attaboys and yay, you're doing it. He goes into the office and the chief medical officer says, so I notice your numbers are changing in your population. Your patients aren't coming in for cardiac casts. They're not having strokes. They're not having heart attacks. They're not, increasing their statins or any of that. So what's going on? And this cardiologist said, yeah, we're doing great business. Oh my God, we're knocking it out of the park. We're taking care of our people. They're not having heart attacks. They're not having strokes. They're not having any of that. Diabetes is going down, all of it. It's amazing. And the chief medical officer said, no, it's not amazing.
I'm sorry, it's not what?
It's not amazing. It's not
Not
good.
amazing.
You have a problem. We hired you to make money for this clinic, this cardiac center. You are not pulling your weight. We have bills to pay. We have people to pay. We've got overhead. And if you can't bring in the amount of money that we expect you to bring in procedures and patient visits and all that, you're going to have to go find another job because we can't keep you.
That is a highly enlightening story.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So Dr. Loam, with that bit of information, created plant-based nutrition movement as a way to continue to get the message out to people and manage his professional life. Basically.
Now, did the doctors change their practice in order to accommodate their overlords there and start, giving out sausages or whatever?
They had to a point. There's a certain amount of cognitive dissonance there. You have to square that. And, cardiologists have a lot of them, huge student debt, loans they have to pay, children they have to feed of their own mortgages and stuff. So they adjusted their practice, I think, a little bit. And then they found a way to manage it. So for Dr. Loam, he created this nonprofit and he continued to share the message through the nonprofit. Yeah. And at work, he gave people advice. However, I never saw him in private practice, so I don't know what kind of advice he would give. But his main avenue for delivering the plant-based whole food message was through the nonprofit. And he would do things like immersions and 5Ks and give talks to people, which was super valuable. Yeah. Ultimately, after about a year of him leading the nonprofit, I think it just became too cumbersome. And he stepped away and now is practicing, still practicing great medicine in California. Yeah. But he left the nonprofit for us to, and we continue the work, and actually expand the work.
So that's the dilemma. The health industry is ultimately a big business. And ill health is good for business. So the sicker the population is, the more money that doctors and drug companies make. Now, I have tried not to be cynical about this, although the story you have just told is a powerful story, and it's hard not to be cynical when you hear it. But I have tried to believe that most doctors and most health practitioners do not want their patients to be unhealthy. They are there to try to help their patients, and that they're good and decent people who are trying to do their best by their patients, and they're not just trying to generate business to build up their, cardiology practice or something. But this is a story where a hospital, and there are some hospitals out there who have been accused of terrible practices, where a hospital is concerned about the bottom line, and the bottom line increases when there are more procedures and more and worse health. And that's, if there are some advantages to a profit-based health system, and there are some advantages to a nonprofit government-based health system, and there's disadvantages either way. But it gets to the point of lunacy when the hospital actually wants you to be sick. That is just, insupportable.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, back to your whole thing about the food that you could eat when you're there, right? It ought to be illegal for someone to sit after a hernia surgery, or after, in my husband's case, a heart attack.
Yeah.
And the first thing they're offered is a bacon and cheese omelet.
Yeah.
That ought to be illegal.
Yeah.
But that is the way our health, I decline to call it a healthcare system. Our medical industry is constructed.
Yeah. Now, Mayor Adams is trying to do some good work in New York to improve hospital food, isn't he?
Yeah. I've heard a little bit
Dr.
about
McCracken, I think, in New York.
McMacken, maybe.
Mackin? How does she pronounce it?
McMacken, I believe. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, they're trying to change that. It's unfathomable. It doesn't even seem like it should be a question. When you know that, let's say, for instance, all processed meat was declared carcinogenic in 2015, why is that still available in hospitals?
Yeah.
It's hard to understand.
Either they're just, either they're just concerned about their profits, or they are science deniers. There is no science that having a ham sandwich is good for you, but that was the first thing I was offered after my surgery. So, on what do they base their recommendations? Clearly not on science.
No.
And, I feel as an advocate for the low-fat, whole food, vegan diet, I feel like I'm just making the case for science. It's just pure science. It shouldn't be political. It shouldn't be even controversial. It's just pure science.
Right.
There is no science that says that sausage is good for you, or that cheese is good for you.
But there is the belief. It's okay. So you can find science that says anything. Now, is it legitimate? Was it paid for by the Beef and Dairy Producers of Association of America? You got, but you can find numbers that say just about anything. I was just watching something this morning where they were talking about how cholesterol is so important for all the cells in the body. Well, yeah, it is. But they didn't say that the body produces enough of its own. You don't need to add any. But it made it sound like, oh my gosh, I better go out and get some right now. Can I get it in a pill? I need extra,
What I feel is that there's no legitimate science on the other side of the debate. There's just obfuscation. If you do a study of 10,000 people, that's one of those self-reporting studies. People report what they ate, and then you can tease out anything you want from that data. You can, you could say, oh, it's the people who had the more carbohydrates who gained more weight. Well, maybe because they were drinking soda and having unhealthy foods that are high in carbohydrate. But you'll never do a legitimate scientific study that finds anything wrong with fruits and vegetables. You'll never do a legitimate scientific study that finds any benefit to meat and dairy. And so, what they do is these confusing self-reporting studies of vast populations, and then they try to tease out some misleading data from it, and then they come up with misleading recommendations. Let them do a study. Take the Esselstyn diet. Esselstyn reversed heart disease and proved it with studies that are just remarkable with the results of how many people with severe heart disease reversed it. Nobody's done a study like that with sausages or with cheddar cheese. Imagine if somebody proposed to the hospital, "Hey, I think sausages really help reverse heart disease, so you want to fund this study I'm going to do?" They'd be laughed at. It's like, trying to fund going to the moon with toothpicks.
Right.
It's nobody's going to build a rocket out of toothpicks. So there is no legitimate science on their side, in my opinion. There's just confusing data that they use to make arguments.
Right. And lots and lots of marketing. Lots and lots of marketing.
And let me issue a challenge right here. If there's somebody out there, some scientist, who thinks that eating meat is healthy, do a study, take half the people on the Esselstyn low-fat whole foods diet and put the other half on whatever diet you believe in. Good luck to you. Nobody's going to take me up on that, Meryl. They're not going to do it because they can't top the diet of whole foods, low fat, no oil. They can't top it. They know they can't top it. And so all they could do is make arguments with misleading studies. It's nonsense. We just need to call their bluff. They have no case. Meryl Fury, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. People can find you on your podcast, which you're the co-host of the Growing a Healthy Child podcast on YouTube.
Yes.
And people should go to pbnm.org. And please, on your anniversary, tell your husband that I say, listen to your wife.
I'll sure tell him.
All right. Let's hope it works. All right. Thank you, Meryl.
You're welcome.
Good speaking with you.
Yeah, likewise. Have a great day.
You too. This has been the Glen Merzer Show, where everyone listening turns vegan, regains their health, and annoys their friends and relatives. Find us on YouTube at the Glen Merzer Show and across all your major podcast platforms. Don't forget to subscribe.